So Kerry and I are going to talk a little bit about how this book came about, and then we will pass it over to the readers. But this whole story started when Kerry and I were collaborating a few years back in the fall on books of our own. And through one of those way leads on to way leads on to way conversations, started talking about a moment in both of our mid-20s when we had what we decided, what we called then a quarter life crisis. Incidentally, both of ours were in Los Angeles. Incidentally, also, both of ours involved our moms basically showing up with a moving truck and moving us back home to sort of find our ground again and figure out what the rest of that decade and the decade that followed, and so forth would contain. And it started as sort of a funny conversation about just about that memory and about what came from it. And it leveled into a pretty serious conversation about moments in a person's life, specifically in a woman's life, when everything has to start over. And we talked about them in many different ways, from sort of rock bottom moments to phoenix moments. But the common denominator was that it's sort of a point zero to start again and to let go of what has been before and supported us before and felt safe and secure before, and really look into the unknowns, into the woods, as it were. And so that question and our curiosity about how this thread links women's stories really universally was the impetus for us to start thinking seriously about what such a collection might entail.
Yeah, we initially, I think, started titling it Women Bottoming Out till we came up with a better title.
Yes, much better title.
But yes. But we started talking about LA and bottoming out in LA, but then like how many other times throughout our lives as women that we hit that rock bottom and that we descend, and like the mythological phoenix, we crash and we have to reassemble ourselves stronger and more resilient than ever and take flight again. And we started talking about our own stories. And then we started talking about other women in our lives and thought like we need to have a book like this that has, dozens of stories by women from all walks of life, from, all points of adversity, who picked themselves back up. And that was really what we wanted to focus on, more so than the bottoming out was the ascent back up and how each woman picked themselves up. And it looks very different for each woman in this story. Some women, it is a soaring triumph. Other women, it's, merely like getting out of bed in the morning or learning to manage and cope. So triumph looks very different for a lot of women in this book. And from our initial little seedling of an idea of, hey, maybe we should just reach out to a few colleagues and peers and see if they might want to contribute, and we can compile an anthology. We sent out an email to peers and colleagues and asked them, if they wanted to send it on. And it was just this spring of emails came flooding into our inboxes of women who were like, yes, I've got my bottoming out story. I've probably got dozens of bottoming out stories, but I have one that I would love to share in hopes it might help someone else. And that was where so many of these stories arose from, was this place of great empathy of, I want my story out in the world, not just for myself, but for other women, men, non-binary individuals. I want it out there. And that email circulated to many women who reached out and said, hey, I have a story to tell. Would you be interested in this? And I'm pretty sure we did not turn anybody down. I mean, if you have a story to tell, like, we would love to be a word that Elisabeth coined, the fairy women who help ferry stories into the world. And I mean, the first story that I received in my email, I had chills. I welled up in tears. I think it was Sherry Briscoe was the first writer story I received. And I remember thinking, we are embarking on a big, humbling journey that it is our honor to be on the receiving end of as editors. And over the next year and a half, we chiseled away 60 stories, including our own. but 60 phenomenal stories by strong, resilient, brave, empathic women. And our book is the culmination of that. And Elisabeth, if you would like to riff more on it.
Well, it really did. I mean, to follow up on that, it really did feel increasingly like the most important book I had ever worked on. It felt like a very different kind of beast than putting out a book by oneself or even with one other person, that it was this team 60 strong. And it felt that each month it got bigger. I mean, I think at first we sort of thought, well, maybe 20 would be a nice, sensible size. But then very quickly about, we had 30 and we thought, oh, well, excellent. And then for a while, we sort of were coasting at 50 and we thought, well, this is nice. But then more kept coming in. And I had one of my students say at the end of class, I saw that you had an anthology and I just am so disappointed that I missed the deadline. And she was an amazing writer. And I said, please, let's add yours. This is on Nyong'o. So it just kept growing and it just became this lovely force, this kind of mix of all. And we had some really neat conversations trying to figure out what exactly it was. And the sort of technical answer is anthology. But what the language that Kerry and I kept coming back to was the language of things like mosaics. And finally, what we settled on was a collective memoir, that it really is, it's this collective weaving. And when I'm not writing or hanging out with my people, big and small, I teach writing at Harvard. And one of the classes that I've been teaching for a few years now is called Mythic Structures to Memoir. And one of the things that we have sort of distilled as a class as an observation. And like any good observation about writing, there will be some excellent exceptions. So I hope you think of some of them. But we've noticed that most memoirs end with either, because they end with the writer still alive. We still don't know how the story is going to go. They often end with a point of either change or acceptance. That we've gone into the woods, we've seen that something is a story that is an uncomfortable story or a catalyst story. And so it either ends with, you leave, you move, you shift, you catch fire, something happens, or you realize, well, this is my life, this is my person, this is my dog, and I love and accept. And so that was sort of an interesting thing, thinking about what are the landing points of these different stories. Do they land with gentleness? Do they land with force? That all of these different ways of landing. And it felt that there were these incredible similarities. And Kerry and I had various spreadsheets that were very dorky, where we tried to group them into categories, thinking in an early version, do we want to have sections in the book of stories about this topic, stories about motherhood, stories about, losing pets, losing beloved, stories about moving. But in the end, we ended up doing it alphabetically because they all just belonged together in their own kind of magic order. But it really, working on it really confirmed something that I've long believed about writing, that there are kind of a few, that human storytelling is kind of a basic thing, that there are kind of a few basic stories that link us all together by simply being human. And however, lonely and unique we feel our story may be, it's probably shared, by most of the world. But the specifics are completely our own, even if we all are telling a story of rebirth, which we all are in this, Mary's is different from Liz's, is different from mine, is different from Carrie's. And so that idea of the, wearing kind of different clothes and skins, but having ultimately the same core felt like a really rich link between all of these stories.
Ultimately, I feel like storytelling comes down to survival. So one of our very first survival tools was, cave people in the caves, writing, etching into soapstone, how to survive a hunt, how to kill something, how to rear your child, where to find food. Storytelling, at its basic is survival. And I feel like, that's what our book has put together, is ways in which these women have survived. And, tacking on to what Elisabeth said, that, memoir is usually like acceptance or change. And I feel like, at fiction writers, typically, you're told your protagonist must either succeed or fail in their goal. And it's so untrue. It's, these stories live on. They live on in these women. And so often, stories like these, stories of overcoming adversity, are really about managing adversity and living with it and being able to share your story and empower others through it. And I think that's a really important aspect of our book, is I think at its most basic, like these are survival stories, and they're put out there just like, you know, women throughout history have shared their stories with their sisters, with their friends, with their daughters to help them survive. I feel like very much the women in this book rose to the occasion to do the same for women here in 2021 and 2022.
I love that. I love that you say that, because it does feel, that feels very true, that it's about going on, you know, whatever on is, surviving is about going on. Since you sort of picked up on the change or acceptance, I want to sort of throw one more thing in the room that I thought was so interesting. I remember in graduate school, one of my professors said that it was basically in American modernism when books on a large scale realized that there's a third ending besides marriage, comedy, or death, tragedy, that there can be sort of something in the middle, which now feels just like, well, duh. But this idea that, you know, going on is an ending. It's not a comedy, it's not a tragedy, but it's just going on.
That is so true, though. I mean, most literature, I mean, women before, I feel like the 20th century, either you died, you got married, or you had a kid. Like, that was how our stories ended. In fiction, a lot of time in memoir, it was like, that was how women's stories got tied up neatly in a bow, was you either die, or you have a kid, or you get married.
Or all three.
Or all three, yes. Hopefully die last. But right. Yeah. But I feel like, you know, women's literature it's evolving like every day. We just exist in a really revolutionary time. I feel like ever since, you know, Me Too and the women's wave of elections, where, you know, a number of women got an unprecedented number of women got elected to Congress, and I mean, that was such you know, what propelled this book forward. I feel like it is. Elisabeth and I realized, like, there's a platform being created in 2018, and that was when the book came about, was late 2018, just after the elections. And we thought, let's be part of broadening that platform and inviting more women up here to tell their stories and to speak out. And, you know, hopefully our book has helped a little bit move the needle forward and broaden that platform for women sharing their stories.
And part of the solution and not the problem. Let us hope. Yeah, it is. It really did come in at a sort of very specific place in time, and it did feel like there was a lot of courage going around. You know, some of the stories in the anthology were I mean, I would say at least quick math. You know, at least a 12th of them in the final 60 initially came in under pseudonyms, and by the end the women decided to use their real name. Many of them were stories that had never been told before, you know, and there I think was a lot of courage throughout the process of writing and revising, and just sort of seeing the process go on.
That was something that, you know, at the end of our process, as we were getting ready to, you know, have this book go to print, that I just got chills every time I received an email from a woman who had written underneath a pen name, and said, look, you know, I think I want to use my own name. I think I want to own this story. And just, I'm getting chills right now thinking about it. But starting out with, you know, we definitely wanted to put out there, you know, if you don't feel comfortable attaching your name to your story because, you know, you don't feel safe, or maybe you still feel guilt or shame or whatever around your story, that's absolutely okay. You can use a pen name. And then, you know, I think we got down to just a couple women at the very end who wanted their names attached to their stories. And that was just one of those chilling emails that I received towards the end. That ended the process.
It was so neat. It was really, you know, we as editors got a chance to feel like we were privy to these stories in so many ways, not only reading them at the end, but Kerry especially. I mean, you know, I don't know how many hours you spent on phone, on Zoom, you know, sitting at cafes, just talking these stories out. You know, talking them out, helping them find their ideal version. There's just a whole lot of collaboration at the conversation level, in addition to at the later editing level, to just really get the stories to be told sort of truly in each woman's voice. And that was a huge part.
I mean, it was, I can't imagine. I mean, some of the stories that are in this book is the women who came to us, came to me, came to Elisabeth and said, I want to tell this story and here's what it's about, but I don't know where to start, because there's so many of them were so weighty, and these women have carried them for so long, and they felt, burdensome, but they didn't know how to unravel it. Or, it's scary to sit down at a blank page and just, where do you begin with something that you've carried with you for so long that, it has so much emotion attached to it. And so it really helps to have an editor to go to. And Elisabeth, of course, is my editor, and say, here, this is what I want to write about. I don't know where to start. And that was something I struggled with as an editor. I was actually the last submission to our book. Elisabeth, you were very patient with me, but I was the last writer to actually contribute this story, because I was so humbled by so many of these stories. And I thought, okay, this is my turn to write about, this trauma or this. And I actually arrived at a point where I felt like I'm not ready to write about certain things that happened in my life, but I had this one story that felt like I was ready to share it. And so that was my contribution to the book. But I just felt, at the risk of sounding like a sycophant, just constantly humbled and in awe of the stories that arrived in our inbox one after one. And I still am. And humbled by the women who rose to the occasion.
It was really neat. The whole thing was just really neat. And then it was really fun to have the book come out and get to see everyone. Because by that point, we had all met, 58 new women around the world. There were sort of new friends and old friends. And so there was this sort of wonderful Zoom release party where we just got to see each other's faces. And it was like Field of Dreams, like, hello, woman, I've read your story. It was such a treat.
We've got this sisterhood that's worldwide. We have, I think, writers from almost every continent except for Antarctica in our book. And so we've got 59, I've got 59 other sisters who are now, we are tied together for life in this book. And actually, Elisabeth and I we started a publishing press, and we're looking at putting together more collections, like What Doesn't Kill Her, but specific to men and to non-binary individuals and to the LGBTQ plus community. So we feel like, there are, women's voices, men's voices, non-binary voices are not monolithic, and they each deserve, their own memoir. And I feel like, we're trying to document and capture this point in time that feels very poignant, particularly in the Western world, and gather as many stories as we can and get them out into the world, so we can hopefully keep this momentum and this progress going that we've been in for a few years now.
That's something that if people have questions at the end about publishing or about that whole process of sort of setting up a press, we would love to answer those, because that was its own sort of story and adventure. But this might be a good time to turn to our readers.
I know I'm this book and our writers and you, it just makes me so giddy that I could riff on it forever. But yes, now's a good time let's turn to one of our writers. Let's turn to Liz Nance, who is a writer who's local to Western North Carolina. Liz is a phenomenal writer. She's also a songwriter. She's a cat mom. She is a tap room owner. Bryson City Outdoors, have to give a shout out to them here in Bryson City. If you ever need a beer and you're in this neck of the woods, drop in and see Liz. She's also an amazing wife and an amazing friend. And she wrote a phenomenal story that I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Liz to read her story.
Hey, so I'm Liz Nance. I did contribute my essay to the story. I'm going to read for you now. It's called Our Secrets Keep Us Sick. But I have to say first that I really appreciate what Kerry and Elisabeth did, not just for me, but for the other 59 women in this book, because I really feel it's super important for us to create a safe place for people to tell their story. And when we step up and tell our story, we are essentially creating a safe space. So thank y'all so much. And I'd like to share my essay with you. Why do we wait to tell our stories? As I've watched and listened to women in the media coming forward about sexual misconduct, and the most common questions I've heard asked are, why now? And why did they wait so long? Most women we see just coming forward aren't new to telling the story. More often than not, we've told our stories already. We told them to someone who was supposed to be trustworthy and safe. When you're shut down by people that you assume will stand up for you, why would you want to tell anyone else? So we lock it up. We convince ourselves that it won't come up again, that it didn't really matter, or that it never really happened. We forget how to be girls, how to be young ladies, and then we don't know how to be women. We forget how to feel human. Then life gets hard, sometimes unexpectedly, and we hit rock bottom. Our secrets keep us sick. I can see that sentence in her handwriting when I close my eyes. She wrote it just 2 weeks before she took her own life. In that same journal, a loose piece of paper tucked in the pages reads, "What had happened was, I can't ward off the memories anymore. My mind won't sleep. Dreams won't quit telling me what's next." Like my mama, I was raised by a tribe of strong Southern women. I grew up thinking that this is what my family was made of and what it was built on. As a child, it seemed to mean something, like bravery, courage, open hearts, and open houses. Yet as an adult, I would find out that earning the title of strong Southern woman meant learning how to suppress your feelings and learning how to keep quiet about things that might bring shame and ruin the reputation of the family. We weren't a brood of tough freedom fighters after all. Instead, we were generations of women doing their damnedest to keep up appearances. Around 1 a.m. on November 1st of 2010, the world lost a strong Southern woman when my mama shot herself in the heart while sitting in her favorite spot on her back porch. In the days and months that followed, a story began to unfold. A story of a woman who had a lot of secrets. A story of a woman who never got a chance to tell her story. A woman who had hit rock bottom without realizing that she could get back up. When a man takes advantage of his position as head of the household, it is devastating to the entire family. A husband, a father, a patriarch is supposed to give love and support to his household. Fathers of young girls should nurture the fragile nature of being female and provide an example of what she should someday seek in a person. How can a young woman feel so strong or empowered if she was raised to feel used and complacent? When I was in 5th grade, I confided in my mama that a grown man had stuck his tongue in my mouth. Her response was, "Well, he does that to his kids." Telling this story to my sister later in life, I learned that the same man had been inappropriate with her, and she had also told our mother. Our mother's response to my sister, "One day you'll meet a man who loves you, and that will be okay." We had both been given very unhealthy response by someone we loved and trusted. Now, I have to say, for those who never met my mama, she was loving, caring, funny, and an amazing wife and mother. Everyone who met her loved her, and she loved them back. But remember, she had known that our secrets keep us sick. And in some instances, those secrets keep us from being able to react properly to things going on around us. In my case, and in my sister's case, we had told someone. We told the person that we thought would tell us what had happened. We told the person that we thought would tell us why it happened. We told the person that we thought would tell us that it wasn't our fault. However, in that moment, in that small downstairs half bathroom of that townhouse during the early hours of our big football party, I tattled on a grown man who was supposed to be a friend of the family, and I didn't get the response I should have from my mama. If, in that moment, my mama would have admitted that what had happened to me was wrong, she would have also, in that moment, had to deal with the fact that it had happened to her too. When my mama passed away, a lot of things were unearthed. I felt like I was part of an archaeological dig that was exposing the shittiness of humanity. It opened my eyes to picture-perfect families and the realities of the harm that keeping up appearances can cause. My mama was a writer. She journaled every day. She took notes. She documented everything. Most families who lose someone to suicide are left with so many unanswered questions. Reading Mama's notebooks and journals opened my eyes to the wild injustices within our family and to a woman who was living in silent terror. She would leave small cries for help in the margins. She wrote the words, quiet strength, inner turmoil, in such beautiful handwriting that you would think it contained a lovely message of hope. Most of her journals were about herself and her daily struggles, and Dad and his work, and how much she loved her kids, and a lot of little stories of sweet memories. After she died, Dad realized that he couldn't stay in the house without her. I drove down from North Carolina to Georgia to help him go through things and pack up. As Dad took apart a dresser in her bedroom, he found another journal, one we hadn't seen. The words inside its covers felt like a hot bullet going straight through my heart. My eyes were open to a woman who had been molested since the age of 4, a woman who was in a sexual relationship with her stepfather, even into adulthood. The part that hurt the most was reading the words, how could they ever forgive me? How could I ever look him in the eyes again? How will my children trust me again? She was struggling to keep the secret inside, but she was struggling even more to figure out how to let it out after she had kept it for so long. The day after the notebook was found, my sister and I sat down with our family to tell them about all of the horrible things that we had learned. Surely we strong Southern women can work through this together, but that wasn't the response we got. Instead, we found out that other people already knew. We were told, well, in another time and place, they would have made a great couple. Turns out that strong Southern women had been hard at work keeping this one under wraps, and this started a fight as I attempted to rip off the blinders. Currently, there are people in my hometown, both friends and family, wondering why I waited so long to share this story. The truth is, I didn't wait. I just tried to share it with the wrong people. I shared it with people that I thought would tell me what happened. I shared it with people that I thought would tell me why it happened. And I shared it with people that I thought would tell me that it wasn't her fault. I expected healthy, helpful reactions. I didn't expect the fear, the blame, or being told to keep quiet. Now I share this story with the people who are closest to me. I share it with the people who need to hear it. I share it with those struggling with similar circumstances. And I share it with people who won't make me feel like the guilty party. I share it with the people who encourage me to keep going. Why do so many people in my family not know the truth? It's not because I didn't want to tell them. I just didn't know where to start. You see, those strong Southern women wanted to deal with things their way. Why aren't other people in my family telling this story, or at least trying to? Why did I slow down in my own telling of it? Why didn't I just put it all out there? I feel like I tried, but I shut down due to the reactions of the ones I told. I was confronting them about something that most of them didn't know. Some of them had suspected, and something that a handful of them already knew. That may have hurt them most. Finding out that someone that my mama loved knew what was happening and never did anything to help her. They say separating yourself from toxic, negative relationships is good for your mental well-being. That's a lot easier said than done when those relationships are with kin. I guess I assumed that once the secrets were out, the rest would be easy. I guess I didn't realize how hard my family was working to keep that closet door closed. You know, the one with the skeletons. But the rug that everything's been swept under isn't touching the floor anymore.
Thank you so much, Liz, for reading that. I can't imagine that's easy to read time and time again, but thank you for getting that story out there.
Thank you.
Next up is Mary Stewart, who will read us her poem. So Mary is an award-winning writer. She won an award for her short story that she'd written. And she has lived here in the mountains of Western North Carolina for the past 30 years, where she owns her own business, a custom home building business. And I met Mary in a poetry class that I taught here in Asheville and was blown away by her poetry and thought she should probably be teaching me. And I sent Elisabeth one of her poems before I even asked Mary to contribute to the book, and said, okay, is this poet as good as I think she is? Because I think she needs to be in our book. And Elisabeth was like, duh, like she needs to be in the Atlantic or the New Yorker, but yes, we need her in our book. So next up is Mary, who will be reading her poem.
Thank you, Kerry, and thank you, Elisabeth. And thank you, Liz. I've read your story before, but hearing you read it was powerful. And I think it was kind of epitomized the entire anthology. So. Okay, my poem is titled Bardo. There was no notice, no sickness or decline or final farewells, just a phone call. Your son passed away this morning. I repeated the words so loud, everyone in the restaurant stopped talking and looked up. My friend Mark caught me before I slid to the floor. He walked me to the hotel lobby across the street, where we sat on cushioned armchairs, waiting for the car to arrive. I stared into my own disbelief, as though I might find something there to grasp. Finally, I said to him, "This is not going to break me," as if to convince myself. I only meant that I would survive. I would flourish, no matter what shatters or gets lost or ceases to exist. I knew this, even though the tunnel of grief that lay ahead would envelop me, nearly entomb me. I knew this one thing, and I had to say it before the walls of my world ruptured. In that state, I ceased to be. I deceased and went with my man-child to a place beyond death. Months later, I walked out of the rubble with one scrap of lucidity, like a mad woman who's discovered the secret of the universe. Only I had. That loss is a gift, an unstoppable vortex, trenching canyons into your being and gyring you into open space, so that you are not the person you once were, but more, able to embrace more, feel more, be more than the tight identity you once held so snug inside. Do not pity the bereaved mothers. They are as adept at losing as they are at having it all, and sometimes scarcely know the difference.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you so much. I want to echo Mary and just what it feels to hear these aloud in the author's voice. This is a first, and this is really, really special. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think this is the part of our hour where if people have questions, we would love to do our best to answer them, both about specific essays in the book. We can do our best on those, or just about the putting it together completely.
So we're still waiting for questions to come in from the audience, but I will get the ball rolling. And first, I just want to thank everyone for being here this evening again, and Liz and Mary, particularly for your readings. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having
me. So my question, it's more just an invitation to discuss an idea, which is, I think there's a fine line that's often crossed between honoring and celebrating strength and resilience, particularly in women or in groups of people who have been traditionally marginalized and othered, right? And expecting strength and resilience and assuming strength and resilience and sort of taking for granted that, oh, of course, these folks are just strong, right? And so I wonder if any of you might have some thoughts on that, those sort of two places that we live in when we're talking about strength and resilience.
I have a lot of people who know me, who heard this story, and people who didn't know me, but they, that is one of the things I hear is, oh, you were so courageous, or you were so brave to put that out there. Really, I was terrified. absolutely terrified. And it's not always easy. People who really know me know that, sure, I sound really strong when I tell this story, when you read this story, but in actuality, it was a lot of tears, a lot of ugly crying, you know, a lot of time spent on the floor with friends and my husband, you know, lifting me up. And that was one of the reasons it was a lot easier to tell the story like this, is because 59 other women were doing the same thing. It wasn't that we were just like, yeah, we're going to go out and we're going to tell our story. Get the pitchforks. We're doing this. You know, we, you know, we're scared, and, you know, it's not the easiest thing to do. There is a huge difference between just having that moment of bravery where you're like, I got to do it right now. I have this platform. I need to do it right now, because it's going to be surrounded by so many moments of weakness.
Well, the process of writing is cathartic, and you may go through your entire life knowing your story and having your private thoughts about it. But when you put it on paper and try to make it something whole with a beginning and an ending, you find you go through transformations yourself. And I encourage all women to do that, whether anybody ever sees what they're writing. But it truly is a spiritual process.
Kerry or Elisabeth?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. You know, I think Liz tried to dismantle that strong Southern women, you know, trope, but then also Liz actually came and spoke to. I teach creative writing for women veterans at the Asheville VA, and I know some of them are in attendance tonight. But Liz actually came and spoke, and I had the women read her story, and a number of women in the class who are Black or women of color spoke up and said, you know, we get that too. You know, even though we might not be Southern women, but, you know, Black women and women of color really, like, they are expected to be strong and resilient and just, you know, weather this and that. And, you know, it looks very different for different women. And, you know, race has a lot to do with that, not just, you know, region or culture, but race in particular in the US, that, you know, that are who are supposed to possess that strength. And diversity was a very important element of our book, and making sure that we had Black women and women of color included in our book that were able to tell their stories.
I love these thoughts and these perspectives. And I think that at the end of the day, courage is a layered thing. And a conversation that my students and I were having just actually 2 days ago in the memoir class was that often we'll walk in, we were comparing memoir to a house, that we'll often walk in on one level and think the story is about this. And we'll stay on that level and we'll explore those rooms. Then all of a sudden there will be a hole and we'll fall into the basement and we'll realize, oh, the story is about something else. And I think that that sort of, once we fall into the basement, we realize, you know, first we look around and wonder if there are other basements, and sometimes there are, and sometimes we keep falling. But once we've sort of excavated each one of those floors, I think there is a lot of sturdiness that comes from being able to say, okay, I know where this is. Okay, I've seen this story. I've told this story. I've walked around that floor. I can build upon that floor. And so I think that the strength is very much layered in the looking at it and the telling it and the not being afraid of it. Because when we're walking around scared of what is in the basement, we're never really free. And I think that is a big part of it.
Thank you for that. Thank you all. And thank you, Kerry in particular, because, and interject myself, but what you said is exactly what I had in my own mind around, you know, assumptions of strength, right? And so, and the idea that you're just, you know, that we do sort of put labels on folks constantly in all sorts of ways. And sometimes that's one of them. I feel we often disserve men in that way as well, right? And so it was great to hear your plans, you know, to have an anthology that, you know, that has actually folks who are identifying as men writing, and that might also get at some of that, right? And what our ideas of masculinity, do to men and people who aren't men in our society. And so, so I love the idea of, again, what you're doing, and Liz, what you did, and picking apart that, repeating the refrain, strong Southern woman, to sort of get at the idea that that sense of strength can actually be our own destruction when it's assumed, and when we aren't given permission to not be strong and to ask for help, and to be vulnerable and heard and seen. Yeah, so I appreciate that so much. You mentioned earlier about embarking on a publishing journey. And so, I'd love to hear more about that. We also, Malaprop's bookstore does small press work as well. And so on a quite small scale, and it's something that some bookshops that I know several bookshops do, and other folks who've put together small presses. We love working with small presses. So
Malaprops just gets cooler and cooler, does it not? Just love Malaprops. Yeah, so we started actually our small press last year, and it was something that Elisabeth actually dreamt up initially. So I actually had been serving as her faculty aide as I was completing my master's at Harvard, and she, emailed me a bunch of different projects that, she had ideas and sparks about, but hadn't yet embarked on. And so I had this document from her from 3 years ago. And we had been shopping our book around to big publishers, to small publishers, to literary agents. And we received a lot of rejection letters that were really nice, though, that were, hey, I would love to read this book, but I'm not sure I could sell it because anthologies don't sell. And that was what we heard repeatedly, was anthologies don't sell. And I feel like we proved them wrong, as well as like Tarana Burke and Brene Brown. They've come out with an anthology that I think hit #1 last year. But when we were shopping this around, we just got to a point where we're like, look, we both have dreamt of starting an independent press that's more like a collective, like a sisterhood. And we went back to Elisabeth's initial document and thought, why did we not release it? Why did we not start our press and release What Doesn't Kill Her with our press and let that be our first book? And Elisabeth, it is her brainchild. So I defer to her to talk about the structure of the press, because it's pretty unique and exciting.
Well, it's a fun, hold on, where should I start this story? Where does the story begin? I actually had a bit of experience in my 20s in publishing, because my high school best friend and I started a literary journal when we were living in Austin, Texas, and there was not at that time a journal for arts and literature there. And we had 13 issues, which was enough to feel like, we had been many writers' first publication, and we felt we had done well. We had, added to the community. We were always in the red. We never figured out the finances of it. But it was interesting how after, 13 issues, which amounted to, it was a quarterly, so about, say, 3 years and change, we came out of it with fiercely different feelings. I came out of it feeling like, I want to work with books forever. This is the thing. Like, this is the magic. And she came out of it saying goodbye to all that and became a professional dog walker, which she still is. And so I knew that it was fun to make books, and that and that it can be done, that we live in this kind of lovely golden age when really anyone can make a book and can design it in a way that it looks like a real book and it reads like a real book. And what it really takes is a good editor and a good designer and good stories, and then the ability to put it, the willingness to talk about it and put it out there. So all of those seemed pretty manageable to keep in-house. And the model that HNS does is very much collaborative, where instead of thinking in terms of, you're an author and just an author. You are a designer and just a designer. You are an editor and just an editor. We really wanted to sort of take the idea of if you teach a woman to make a book, so that we have book cycles where say that Stephanie, say that you had a book, you would come in and work as the designer or marketer or copy editor for Liz's book. Say that's, one book cycle ahead of you. And then after that, maybe you would work in a different capacity on Mary's book. And then the next book in the cycle would be your book. And Liz would work as the copy editor. And I would work as actually, you don't want me as the marketer. I would work as something else, the copy editor. Kerry would be the marketer. But basically the idea that we're all writing, editing, designing, marketing, we're all doing all parts of it. Very, very collaborative. I got the idea from friends of mine who own acupuncture cooperatives and midwife cooperatives, where they just sort of all do all of the things and carry it together in a really graceful way. And so it seemed, so anyway, so there were sort of lots of little fine tunings that we still need to do. And we learned a lot from this first one, and that we can pay forward to the next one. But the hope is that there will be book cycles that are very collaborative and where everyone gets to sort of just learn and work together in making a whole lot of different books.
That's wonderful. And so do you have folks who come in and offer training around design, for instance, and you all just sort of learn together and then divvy up the tasks? Or
we're hoping okay. to do that. Our current designer is brilliant and is also an author, Sarah Trigay, who's written some really neat YA books, one in verse that I just love called Love and Leftovers. She did the design, and our plan is that she will basically be apprenticeship. I'm the daughter of an English teacher and can copy edit anything. So I would love to take, sort of start with editing and teach what I know to whoever's interested in learning. And Kerry has, has been our marketing guru. So, she has taught me and can sort of teach. So the idea is that we sort of start with what we know and then figure out who's interested in learning what and start sort of mentoring from there. And then eventually be able to all kind of help each other in each one of the capacities.
Oh, Kerry, did you have something to add? Forgot to unmute myself.
Oh, no, I feel like Elisabeth covered it all.
Wonderful, thanks. So I'd love to, we actually just have a few minutes left. And so I'd love to give you all an opportunity, if you would like, no pressure, to recommend a book. In addition to What Doesn't Kill Her, obviously, that goes without saying, and we've posted links to that, and I'll encourage folks again to buy What Doesn't Kill Her. But we'd love to offer our viewers, listeners, other things to add to their TBR pile from the folks we host.
I will jump in first, if that's okay. So I have an amazing novel here called She Never Told Me About the Ocean that was written by Elisabeth Sharp McKetta, who's probably going to kill me after this. But this is her first novel, and it came out last March, I believe. And I've read it a couple times, and of course I'm biased, but it is just a gorgeous tale of a grandmother, of a mother, of a daughter, there's so much mythology in it, and just Elisabeth is also a published poet. I believe she's published 9 books. You're like up to nearly a dozen. But this novel is really something special. It was published by Paul Dry Books, and I could sink into it, I feel like, every few months and not get sick of it, because her prose is just so stunning. It's like reading verse, but it just flows so beautifully. And it's a book that I feel like anybody who has a grandmother, a mother, a daughter, a woman in their life, that they should read this book. And get it from Malaprops.
Oh yes.
Shop local, shop indie.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry, and thanks Elisabeth for another book to offer to our folks today. Yeah. Who's next?
I mean, I have, it's funny. I did not expect to answer the question in this way, but 2 of the books that I've been sort of gaga over this fall have both been narrated by robots. One of them is my 11-year-old daughter's book club is reading it, and it's by a UK author named Kirsty Applebaum, and it's called True Friend. Spelled TROO friend, and the other, and it's this, the narration is just fascinating. and anyway, all sorts of examples, and I won't subject you to them, but just wonderful moments where you see the narrator processing the things that humans say that the robot's programming sort of doesn't allow her to understand. You know, like if someone is getting excited and you say, keep your socks on, the robot will check to see if their socks are on. Just these wonderful details. It's such a great, and then also I'm right now just a few pages into Clara and the Sun. So that is the other one that is has felt really exciting in terms of the narrator.
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Mary.
I've been reading so many good novels lately. Anthony Doerr, Of the Light We Cannot See, and Wally Lamb, This Much I Know Is True. Then I read V.E. Schwab, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Fantastic. But the one I did really want to recommend is The Henna Artist. And I could look up I can't remember even the name of the author right now. It's an Indian woman. It's her first novel, and you won't even believe it. The Henna Artist. Excellent. Lovely book.
We'll certainly pull up Patricia's probably pulling up the author right now, but we'll at least get the title in there in the chat for folks. Thank you, Mary. Liz, how about you?
I have a severe case of not being able to focus on one thing for a very long period of time. So I'm actually in the middle of several books. So when you ask the question, I'm just going to tell the two books that came to my mind that I have completed reading that have just kind of stay in my heart a little bit. The first one is an older book. It was written by the songwriter Judy Collins. It's called Sanity and Grace. And it was a book that really helped me a lot when I first lost my mom to suicide. It was recommended to me. I wasn't aware that she had lost her 16-year-old son to suicide. So there was definitely that connection in that book, but also she was a songwriter and somebody that was in the public eye a lot. So, you know, she had to keep it all together while she was going through all this stuff. So I really related to that. And then the second book that I wanted to recommend is actually another local Bryson City, North Carolina artist. And she just published her first book last year. I think it was September. I was trying to find that. Her name is Chris Ramos Green, Greene. And she wrote a book called Embrace That Girl, a love story with the girl in the mirror. And I really liked the book because it was a lot easier of a read than some of the heavy stuff I've been reading. But at the same time, it was a very real story of her own personal life and all the stuff she was just going through and trying to find herself as a young woman in a big city, ultimately moving to a small town, realizing she could be who she wanted to be better there. But there were all these just like little nuggets of self-help gems in the whole book of, you know, just how to not feel like you have to live up to other people's expectations. And I just really enjoyed that book. And it was a quick, easy read, but it was a lot of fun.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz. Thank you all so much again, Elisabeth Sharp McKetta, forgive me, Kerry Garvin, Mary Stewart, and Liz Nance. It's been lovely to spend an hour with you and to hear more about the anthology, What Doesn't Kill Her. And thanks again to everybody who's been with us this evening. We appreciate you joining us, and please stay safe and well. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Stephanie. Bye, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much.